China has slowly taken control of a region Russia always believed would remain under its influence. While Putin focused on fighting the West and expanding his military presence in Ukraine, Beijing focused on something far more effective. It used money, long-term plans, and economic pressure. It did not send soldiers, it did not threaten anyone. It simply built. And as China built new roads, new pipelines, and new rail corridors across Central Asia, the entire balance of power in Eurasia began to shift. What used to be Russia's quiet backyard is now moving firmly into China's orbit. The shift did not happen overnight. It came through hundreds of deals, millions of workers, and years of patient strategy. Now the question stands: how did China push into a region Russia once controlled for centuries? How did Moscow let it slip away? And what does this transformation mean for the future of Eurasian power? For more than 100 years, Moscow viewed Central Asia as a critical part of its empire. Under the old Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan were tightly integrated into Russia's political and military system. Russia built railways, military bases, and large Soviet-era factories across the region. Russian was the language of opportunity. Moscow appointed local leaders. It was a clear hierarchy with Russia above everyone else. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the system fell apart, but some influence survived. Russian troops stayed at certain bases. Russian factories still depended on workers from Central Asia. Migrants moved north for jobs and sent money home. For years, leaders of these countries kept close ties to Moscow because they believed stability was more important than anything else. Russia offered predictable relations and old networks. China, at this time, was not yet a major player. This changed in the early 2000s when China's economic growth exploded. Beijing needed energy, new trade routes, and reliable neighbors. It looked west, and Central Asia was the perfect doorway to Europe, Russia, and the Middle East. China did not try to replace Russia directly. It did not challenge Moscow in public. Instead, it introduced the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013. This was a massive global infrastructure program that promised loans, investment, and long-term partnerships. Central Asia became one of the first major regions to receive billions of dollars from the plan. Roads were upgraded, factories were built. New pipelines linked Central Asian gas fields to Chinese buyers. And slowly, dependence shifted. Beijing offered something Russia could not: large-scale economic growth. Meanwhile, Russia became distracted. In 2008, it fought a war in Georgia. In 2014, it annexed Crimea and faced sanctions. Then in 2022, it launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Each conflict drained resources, created political isolation, and pushed Russia into deeper confrontation with the West. Central Asia watched all of this carefully. While Russia was fighting, China was investing. While Russia was losing markets in Europe, China was opening new ones. And while Russia tried to use old Soviet nostalgia to maintain influence, China focused on jobs, investment, and infrastructure. Central Asian leaders began to see that Russia could not offer the same future China could. The numbers tell the story clearly. Chinese investment in Central Asia hit $25 billion in just the first half of this year. That is a 257% jump from the previous year. New highways cross Kazakhstan, new industrial parks operate in Uzbekistan. Turkmenistan now sells most of its gas to China, not Russia. Freight trains filled with Chinese goods pass through Central Asia on their way to Europe. These trains avoid Russian territory entirely, cutting travel time and reducing shipping costs. This creates a new reality. Economically, China matters more than Russia. The shift is also visible in culture and politics. Kazakhstan has switched from the Cyrillic alphabet, which is tied to Russia, to a Latin-based script. Schools teach Chinese language programs. Students travel to universities in Beijing and Shanghai. Chinese companies employ thousands of Central Asian workers. These are soft changes. They do not appear dramatic, but over time they change how people view partners and opportunities. Russia is still present, but it is no longer the default option. As China strengthened its influence, Russia weakened. Sanctions have cut deeply into the Russian economy. Oil exports have dropped sharply. The ruble has lost value. Shipping restrictions make it harder for Russia to sell products. Central Asian economies depend heavily on remittances. the money migrant workers send home from Russian jobs. As Russia's economy slows, these remittances shrink. Tajikistan relies on these payments for almost a third of its entire economy. When Russia struggles, ordinary families struggle too. Leaders in Central Asia cannot ignore this. They need stability. China provides it. Russia does not. The shift also includes security. Russia has always been the main security provider in the region. It leads the Collective Security Treaty Organization, a group similar to a local version of NATO. But its credibility has been damaged. When Russia struggled to make progress in Ukraine, it showed Central Asia that Moscow's military is not as strong as it once claimed. When border tensions rise between countries like Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, Russia now offers diplomatic statements instead of decisive action. The CSTO looks weaker each year. China has taken advantage of this. It has begun small joint patrols in Tajikistan near the Afghan border. It trains local forces through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. These steps are limited but symbolic. They show that China is slowly entering areas once dominated by Russian power. Despite China's rise, Central Asia is not turning into a region controlled by Beijing alone. These states are acting in their own interest. They want options. They want to balance relationships. They work with Beijing for infrastructure. They work with Russia for security. They work with Europe and the United States for trade. They want to avoid being trapped under any single power. China understands this well. It does not demand political loyalty. It avoids military commitments. It focuses on building things that create long-term reliance, not fear. Roads, pipelines, and factories last for decades. Once they exist, trade naturally follows. This creates economic gravity that slowly pulls countries closer to Beijing. Over time, Russia becomes less important. This is the part that worries Moscow most. In October, when the United States imposed new sanctions on major Russian oil producers, China quietly reduced imports. Instead of helping Moscow stand against sanctions, it stepped back to protect its own economic interests. Russian officials tried to explain it away, but everyone saw the truth. Beijing will protect its own stability first. The partnership between Russia and China is not one of equals. It is a partnership where China gains more, has more leverage, and takes fewer risks. Russia cannot offer the same benefits. This is why Central Asian countries increasingly lean towards China. China's success is not guaranteed. There are protests against Chinese projects in several countries. People worry about debt, land rights, and foreign workers. Some projects have been delayed because of local resistance. Chinese banks are also becoming more cautious as global debt rises. Beijing is not expanding without limits, but even with these challenges, it remains the strongest economic force in the region. Russia still has strengths, especially in security and cultural ties. Many people speak Russian, many families work in Russia. Many leaders trained in Russian universities, but these strengths are slowly losing weight. When a country needs new energy plants or new rail lines, it turns to China. When it needs large-scale funding fast, it turns to China. Russia cannot match these offers. The region is also attracting new attention from Europe and the United States. The EU is investing in new trade corridors that connect China to Europe through Kazakhstan and the Caspian Sea, completely bypassing Russia. The United States is expanding diplomatic efforts. India, Turkey, and Iran are also becoming active players. Central Asia is no longer a closed region shaped by one empire. It is becoming a strategic crossroads where many powers compete through trade, technology, and diplomacy. This leaves Putin in a difficult position. Losing Central Asia means more than losing influence. It means losing economic partners, losing energy transit routes, and losing political leverage. Russia has used this region to project power for more than a century. Now that influence is slipping away piece by piece. China's rise in Central Asia makes Russia look smaller on the world stage. It undermines Putin's image of being a global leader, and it raises a painful question for the Kremlin. If a region right next door is choosing China over Russia, what does that say about the future of Russian power? Inside Russia, elites and officials see these shifts. They see investments leaving. They see countries ignoring Moscow's priorities. They see partners turning to Beijing. The erosion is slow, but it is steady. And once influence is lost, it is very difficult to regain. Russia cannot rebuild trust with money it does not have. It cannot rebuild military strength quickly while fighting a long war. It cannot match China's economic growth. The playing field is simply no longer equal. Central Asia is not abandoning Russia out of anger. It is making practical choices. Leaders want stability, growth, and reliable partners. China provides those things. Russia offers promises and speeches. Promises do not build factories, speeches do not keep the lights on. And as every new road and rail line connects the region further east, Moscow's position becomes weaker. The map of Eurasia is changing, not through force but through development, not through threats but through contracts. Influence today is measured by who finances the future. China finances it, Russia does not, and that is why the region is drifting east. The transformation is quiet but powerful. It shows the world that influence in the 21st century can be won with investment instead of armies. It shows that old empires can lose control without a single battle. And it shows that the future of Eurasia will be shaped more by economic power than military force. Thank you for watching. We are an independent news channel, and your support helps us continue bringing you clear and honest reporting. Please like and subscribe to support our channel.